I've noticed some strange trends going on here recently in the guitar industry. That's what we're going to talk about in this video today.
Just play the damn thing.
That's right, this video is about 6 trends that I've noticed here recently in the guitar community. Some of these trends are probably warranted. Some of these trends I think are placebo effect. And by placebo effect, that's a nice way of me saying guitar players are the biggest sheeple on the planet and oftentimes completely incapable of thinking for themselves. Let's get to it, shall we? Number 1, the Boss Metal Zone. This is probably the most well-known example of this phenomenon. For some reason, the Boss Metal Zone went through a period there of about 10 years when, when the guitar community, particularly on the interwebs, decided that the Boss Metal Zone was just the biggest piece of dog shit pedal that anybody had ever seen before in their lives. Never mind the fact that the Boss Metal Zone is the number 2 best-selling pedal in Boss's entire history. Number 1 only being the TU2, TU3, the tuner pedal. That's how many metal zones that Boss has sold. An absolute shit ton, and also why that pedal is still in production today with its original design intact. In response to the internet suddenly clowning on the Metal Zone for so many years, Boss responded by saying, "Okay, assholes, we're going to show you just how great this circuit actually is," and brought out the Wazacrap version. If you've not heard this pedal, this is one of the best high-gain metal distortion pedals on the market today, with the exact same circuit as the original, just higher-end upgraded components. And that, combined with the fact that metalheads suddenly learned how to use the return port of the effects loop to bypass the amp's preamp section, have suddenly produced the opposite phenomenon, and now all of a sudden the Metal Zone is back to god-tier status. Meanwhile, people like me who grew up learning to play metal guitar in the 90s with that pedal have always loved the Metal Zone. I always have, I always will, and if you are a longtime viewer of this channel, you already know that. Number 2, PV Sheffield speakers. This is a more recent example of the Metal Zone phenomenon that I just talked about, and I have no idea where it came from. Because once upon a time, the PV Sheffield was regarded by many, many people as PV's greatest guitar speaker. Eddie Van Halen himself used them quite a bit back in the 90s, obviously because they were designed for him, and lots of other people did as well. I think likely what happened is somebody in a guitar group on the interwebs out there somewhere suddenly said PV Sheffield suck, and then a few hundred other people read it, and then all of a sudden repeated it, and now all of a sudden we don't like Sheffield speakers anymore, which is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard. By the way, I have a Sheffield speaker in my 6505 Plus combo sitting right here across the room in front of me that I just recorded a video with last week. If you want to know how that speaker actually sounds, there's a link to that video down in the description. Then come back and tell me what's wrong with it. Now look, I get it. If you legitimately don't like that speaker, fine. I'm not disputing that. I'm not saying everybody should like what I like or anybody else for that matter. But seriously, suddenly, just over the last year or so many people suddenly complaining about the Sheffield. Come on, man. Quit following the damn crowd so much. Number 3, Celestion Vintage 30s. This is the opposite of the PV Sheffield effect, because this is the speaker that metal guitar players in particular all seem to have. Why? Because it is regarded as the metal sound, among other genres, but metal in particular. Glenn Fricker's talked about this here recently on his channel, and this is one that I do agree with him on. Vintage 30s are not the only speaker out there for metal. Vintage 30 clones, like the Veteran 30 from Warehouse Guitar Speakers, are not the only speakers out there for metal tones. Experiment, try some different things. You might actually find something off the beaten path from Eminence or JBL or Warehouse Guitar Speakers, among others, that you might actually enjoy. Number 4, heavy gauge guitar strings. I do not understand what is with guitar players' obsession with having to get the heaviest gauge of guitar strings that they can possibly muster onto their guitar. And for any tuning, not just for the heavily low tune stuff. Talk about some serious dick waving. Who was it? I think it was Billy Gibbons, that said, "Why work so hard to play guitar?" Billy Gibbons himself has used a lot of different gauges of guitar strings, but he's probably most well known for using 7s, which is about as light as it gets. I myself, on standard tuned guitars, generally use 8s these days. On guitars tuned a half step down, I generally use 9s, and guitars that are a whole step down and maybe drop C, I usually put 10s on, like my trusty Schecter CR6 that I use in so many of my demo videos. That guitar has 10 to 46 gauge strings on it. I personally happen to enjoy lighter gauge strings. Why? They're easier to play, they tighten at the bottom end a lot more, and like Billy Gibbons said, why work so hard to play guitar? I get it. Some people play hard, and they gotta use heavier strings to play, to keep from breaking them all the time. I get it. But for the dude that's putting 12s on his standard tuned guitar and making sure everybody knows that he plays 12s on his standard tuned guitar, seriously, dude, what's with the dick waving? Who are you trying to impress? Number 5, YouTube channels. Yes, I'm including myself in this list. How about that? So if you're already pissed off at me because I've already said something that's offended you in this video, guess what? I'm including myself here too. What do I mean by YouTube channels? Well, you think about it, back in the day, when guitar channels were just kind of starting to become popular, you had Fluff, you had Ola England, Keith Merrow, Pete Thorne, and that was really about it. And I guess later on you had guys like Scott Grove, really nice guy by the way, Gearman Dude, and where's he been lately? People like that all came along, and now all of a sudden you got every Tom, Dick, and fuckhead like myself that decides we're going to jump on the YouTube bandwagon just to gain some self-recognition. Okay, now in my case, I had actually stepped away from the guitar business for about 6 months and suddenly realized I got $40,000 worth of gear sitting in here and not doing anything with it. Wasn't playing in a band at the time, so I decided why not go, get a cheap camera and start doing YouTube videos. That's how this channel got started. 8 years later, every single schmuck out there with a guitar, an amp, and a video camera is out there trying to make the world a better place and succeeding very, very, very minimally. Number 6. I'm calling this one the Josh Scott effect. And what am I referring to? Yes, I'm referring to that weird phenomenon that goes on every single time that Josh Scott puts up a video about a pedal, and the entire guitar community goes batshit crazy thinking they just hit the lottery because they happen to own it. Remember the Bad Monkey a few months ago? Of course you do. Even if you didn't see that video, and I recommend that you do watch it because it is a great video. Even if you didn't see that video, the whole premise of that video was simply to not worry so goddamn much about the gear that you don't have and just use what you got. And he went through and made the Bad Monkey sound like a Klon and Tube Screamer and a whole bunch of other types of pedals out there that nobody really realized that it could actually sound like. And as a result, within 24 hours of that video, a video of a $59 pedal, by the way, so many people who happen to own that pedal just automatically decided that that thing is now worth $500 or $600, and that's what they were being listed for on Reverb and eBay and every other used gear site that you can think of. All because Josh Scott said it was awesome. I actually did an entire video on this phenomenon, essentially making fun of all the people that reacted this way, and it still blows my mind how many of those people actually had no idea that that video was a direct jab at them. I lost a little bit more respect for humanity that day. Where people come up with this shit, I don't know. It just happens. And it happens right before our eyes. And my job as the creator of this channel is to make sure and put those people on blast so that we, together, as a family, can laugh at them. What other strange guitar community phenomenons have you noticed here lately? Leave a comment down below. I'd love to read about it. Adios.